Atheism rises up in individuals that have either come to believe that rationality, comfort, and science can provide a stable fundament for their chaotic lives, or otherwise an extreme occurrence, such as war, has shaken up their belief in good and God to the core. Interestingly enough, the 100 Years' War in Europe, which is reflected in Berserk, doesn't bring religion to a halt, but probably intensified it. As we can see, there are two extremes of the religious spectrum: losing belief in God or attaining and strengthening it. Berserk is deprived of a god from the beginning. Especially in the manga, the dark fantasy is clearly depicted. Gore, suffering, and pain rule the landscape. That's how Guts grew up, anyway. He was born from the corpse of his hanging mother into a puddle of blood, and was later taken care of on the battlefield. Although Guts never really exhibits or displays religious interests, he can surely be thought of as a very pragmatic and reality-grounded person. The image he had seen since childhood couldn't surely be created by God. Thus, Guts' belief in God could be seen in a pessimistic light. Friedrich Nietzsche is quoted with stating, "Is man merely a mistake of gods, or God merely a mistake of man? Did God commit an error in creating such devilish earthlings that bring upon hell, or did humans create such a figure in order to somehow explain the cruel reality? If God did exist and we killed him, then there is nothingness, nihilism. In this world, there is less potential for good and virtue. If God does not exist, everything is permitted," as Fyodor Dostoyevsky says. Well, if God is truly dead or even non-existent, then something has to be created in his stead. That's what the God hand is. While God and good are questionable and hard to attain, evil and suffering are a sure thing and are as deep as hell. And hell is unending, mind you. Sinful creatures are a part of the God hand, which means that evil rules the world and is influential in its causality. The Behelit makes you cling onto life and its suffering, while you have to sacrifice all that you love. Christianity, for example, offers salvation and a path to heaven in the end. This is the scariest part of Berserk. There is no end to suffering and struggle. And it gets worse once the world of apostles seeps into the human world. Hell seeps into Guts' life, and as we know, hell is endless. For someone to live under such conditions, one has to be exceptionally resilient and strong, as Guts is. I will draw a strict line here between the fictional work Berserk and our world. While it is true that in a godless world you need to have similar qualities to Guts', our world is not necessarily comparable to it. God is a very fluid thing that gets stronger with belief. While you can certainly live without belief in God, you will have to find other ways to overcome the world, as Guts did. But enough about that. The God hand currently consists of Slan, representative of the sin, lust; Ubik, who manipulates people into accepting the deal of the Behelit; Conrad, who spreads disease and pestilence; Void, who is the oldest member and strongly connected to causality; and of course Griffith, who represents pride and envy. The 5 members are meant to do whatever they want. This intertwines with the quote of Dostoyevsky that without God, everything is permitted. We know that the members were all probably humans before, that had such affinity to evil that they were chosen by destiny to use the egg of the king. God is dead and human rules. The cruel world is unexplainable and insufferable, and people try to understand it and overcome it somehow. Hence why these negative emotions created the idea of evil and gave birth to apostles who only take advantage of the weak. Nietzsche had this exact concern that once God is not present in the life of humans, humans would have to think up a figure like the Übermensch or the Superman. We know how that ended in Nazi Germany, where that philosophy was wrongly utilized. It was actually misinterpreted because Nietzsche meant personal overcoming, not global and racial one. Nietzsche thought of humans like guts who forged their own path with their own strength. In Dostoyevsky's famous novel Crime and Punishment, the main character commits a murder of an old, rich lady because he believes that she doesn't distribute her riches fairly to others and greedily keeps them to herself. He decides to take the responsibility of a god and take the life of another because of a higher purpose, as he sees it. The main character sees himself in the light of a Napoleon, a hero, a superhuman. However, his nihilistic individualism is put up against the framework of Christian values, and he is constantly torn inside by guilt and dark thoughts throughout the book. Eventually, he serves his punishment and even searches guidance from God. This character of Dostoyevsky's, as well as Berserk's Griffith, feel like they are above other people. The viewer can sympathize with such villainous protagonists, but as we observe in the case of Guts, we find it unfair and undesirable to trample upon others. We cheer for justice and personal strength, not for tyranny and global domination. In many ways, Guts has become his own source of godliness. In many ways, he is the good hero who fights against evil. Well, we see the possible consequences of an evil god, or of the absence of a good one. A lot of suffering and struggle for mankind. Kentaro Miura's work is deeply philosophical and complex to be able to be tackled in one sitting. Still, it is apparent that he wanted to put a subject like Nietzsche's philosophy and nihilism, which was heavily present in the 20th century, under scrutiny. To this day, it is a theme of the following generations. So, the question of Nietzsche at the end of the 19th century stands firm. Is God dead? And have we killed him?